Today I'm talking about moments in TV and film that really confused my young autistic brain. And I'm a Gen-Xer, so the examples I'm giving today will probably resonate more with people my age or perhaps elder millennials. So I'd love to know if they resonate with you in any way. And I'd love to hear your own examples of moments that have really confused you. So by all means, leave those down in comments because I would love to know. Incidentally, there will be spoilers during the course of this video, but I will give you an alert when they're going to come up. Number one is Gremlins. And this is just such a brilliant movie, really, isn't it? And it was huge at the time. Everybody was watching it and talking about it. And as a child in the 80s, it was just kind of an iconic movie, really. And there was loads that I loved about this movie, but one of the rules for owning a Mogwai absolutely just did my head in, and it was do not feed your Mogwai after midnight. And I just thought, it's always after midnight. Surely they need to give a more kind of clear rule as to owning a Mogwai, and this just didn't make sense to me whatsoever. And I remember feeling really frustrated about it at the time, and it just really bothered me. And it bothered me for years afterwards as well. I just felt that the rules should have been kind of more clear because this was just kind of too loosey-goosey for me. In that you're always going to break that rule. So it's just really interesting looking back now, because obviously, I didn't know I was autistic then, but it's just really interesting now, kind of looking back at my young autistic self. And yeah, I obviously had a thing about rules. Number two, with a spoiler alert, is Pretty in Pink. And I really, really loved this film, and I've still got a real affection for it because I watched the film no end of times, to be honest. I just found kind of real comforts in it in many ways because the protagonist, Andy, is an outsider and she's kind of just really interested in kind of doing her own thing, really. And as an autistic teenager, there was a lot there to resonate with, but there was just one thing about that film that I just could never get, and it was how Andy was still really, really interested in Blaine after he was just so horrible to her. I could completely get how the character of Andy would have an enormous crush on Andrew McCarthy in the early parts of the film, but as soon as he acted kind of shifty in, saying to her that he'd take her to the prom and then said he'd forgotten that he'd asked somebody else to the prom so he could no longer take her, I just thought as if she'd be interested in him. He's just been so horrible and has, in essence, humiliated her. So I just couldn't get past this. When she turns up at the prom, essentially on her own, although Ducky has kind of walked her in, I just thought, why on earth would this character give this other character a second chance, really, when he's been so horrible to her? And I know that had I been humiliated in a similar way, I would absolutely not be interested in a person. And I just found it fascinating that this was the ending to the movie. I just don't understand how she ends up with the boy that was horrible to her, but I guess that may be just me. But I'd love to know if you can relate down below. Number three, with a spoiler alert again, is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And this was another film that I absolutely loved as a teenager. I watched it just so many times, and I think that's Pretty in Pink and Little Shop of Horrors were my go-to films at that time. I just really loved them. But in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, towards the end of the movie, we see a bit of a standoff between his sister Jeannie and the headmaster of the school, Ed Rooney, and essentially a battle between the two ensues, and it's all a bit daft really, but I really struggled with the concept of the two characters having this battle, and I really wondered at the end of the film what would happen when Jeannie would have to go back to high school and then see her headmaster, and they'd then both know that this kind of thing had gone down in Ferris and Jeannie's house. And I just was left almost worrying about Jeannie and what would happen to her when she went back to high school. It's like the ending kind of wasn't enough for me. I felt like I needed more to understand what went on, really. I wanted essentially to know that Jeannie was okay and she didn't get into trouble. And yeah, I really struggled with the ending. And that's not to say in any way that I struggle with open-ended films, because I love them actually. Oops, spoiler comes to mind, along with oops, spoiler. I really, really enjoy ambiguity in film, and for me, it just leaves you kind of pondering all sorts of questions about what you've just watched, really, and its meaning, etc. But when there's kind of like a clear kind of story going on like that between Jeannie and her headmaster, yeah, I just struggle. I just struggle, and I don't like good characters ending up in trouble, really. It's almost like I empathise with them too much, really, and it's the best way that I can describe it. And yeah, it's an ending that I struggle with, I have to say. Number 4, with a spoiler alert, is Four Weddings and a Funeral, and this was just such an enormous film upon its release, and yeah, just hugely iconic. And in many ways, I really liked the film, although it's not kind of usually something I'd be drawn to. I'm really not into kind of rom-coms at all, and yeah, there's just something about this film that kind of really captured the zeitgeist, really, and I don't doubt it had a lot to do with Hugh Grant, because he's just really good in this film. But there is one thing about this film that I absolutely could not comprehend, and I kind of still struggle with it, really. I just don't get why this goes on in the film, but it's with regard to the character of Carrie, which is played by Andy McDowell, why she felt the need to marry Hamish. She was obviously really taken with the character played by Hugh Grant, and it seemed kind of obvious they were really into each other. And I just couldn't understand why she'd be marrying this kind of old bloke, really, that seemingly had very little appeal or charm. And I just didn't get it. I just did not get it. And it really bothered me when I was watching this film, certainly, for the first few times. I just thought, why on earth are we supposed to kind of believe this? Or maybe it's just me that's got an issue with it. I just don't get it. I should point out, actually, that Carrie and Hamish don't actually get married in the end. Carrie does choose Charles, but the very fact that she was going to get married to Hamish was just too much for me to cope with. Number 5 is a combination of the TV series Dallas and Dynasty, and these were on kind of all the time during the 80s, and I'm kind of bundling them together for this video because I can't really distinguish very much between the two, because my memory is dreadful. But there used to be kind of like a trope that would happen during these TV shows pretty regularly, and it absolutely did my head in. And the scenario would be that a woman character would be kind of really angry or frustrated at a man, and then the man would then essentially force himself on her and kiss her, and she would then initially struggle with that, rightfully so, but then she would somehow kind of acquiesce and then think it was the best thing ever that was happening to her in the moments. And even as a young autistic girl, I knew that was a really dangerous message. You know, we should never be told through the media that this behaviour is acceptable, and it doesn't matter that it was of another era. I think they should have known back then that that was a dreadful message to send out, and I hated it. I hated seeing this kind of stuff on TV because even then, as a young girl, I knew it was just wrong. Number 6 is the film LA Confidential, and I watched it again fairly recently just to kind of remind myself of it. And it's obviously a great looking film, you know, aesthetically. It's just so visually appealing. But yeah, there's one kind of plot in this film that I just could not get on board with and just really irritated the hell out of me. And it's the fact that we are supposed to believe as a viewer that Kim Basinger looks in any way like Veronica Lake. And other than her hair and the fact that they're both really attractive white women, I just cannot see any likeness whatsoever. And I just got really irritated by this whole thing to the point where I couldn't really concentrate on anything else kind of going on in the film, really, because of this one thing that we're kind of supposed to believe in. And, you know, had the film been about the fact that Kim Basinger looks like Kim Wilde, or did look like Kim Wilde at the time, you know, I could fully get on board with that. But the very fact that she looks nothing like Veronica Lake was just, yeah, it just sent me into, yeah, just a real state of confusion. I just could not get past it at all. And it was really interesting to be reminded of that quite recently because, you know, having watched the film again recently, I still felt the same. I just felt like I cannot get past this thing that you're asking us to believe in because it's just not true. Number 7 is Carry On films, and inexplicably, these are just a huge kind of British institution, really. I think certainly in past decades, they were really, you know, well watched and adored by many people, and they're still regularly shown here in the UK. I think there's always one on a Saturday afternoon on TV, but I have never been able to get on board with these films. And I think really it's because I've similar feelings about them as I have Dallas and Dynasty, in that they're just flagrantly sexist. And even as a young autistic girl, I really struggled with the concept. I just could not understand why anybody would find any kind of entertainment in them, really. The only one that I have seen and I did kind of like actually was Carry On Screaming, and you know, I really love Halloween, and Vanessa Fielding in it is just incredible, really. But for all the others, I just cannot, yeah, I cannot get on board with them. I just never understood the appeal, and yeah, still don't really. Number 8 is Home Alone, and I know that this is a beloved movie and it just gets mentioned all the time, even today, doesn't it? It's just become just this kind of huge thing, really. And, you know, I kind of get it, but I just couldn't get on with this film at all when I watched it. And yeah, it's never been a film that I've been able to return to as a result. So I've only ever watched it once, but I just felt that the whole concept of Kevin McAllister being left alone without his parents even noticing for however long that period was just for me, just way too outlandish for me to kind of get on board, really. I just felt like it would be completely obvious that your child wasn't with you, and I just couldn't get past it. I could not suspend my disbelief for that amount of time, really. I just thought, this is not believable. You'd know if your child wasn't there. And that's not to say that parents lose their children and, yeah, they just don't realise that they're there for however long. And in fact, I got lost in, I think it was a shopping centre when I was young. So I do understand that these things happen. You can't have your eyes on your child for 100% of the time, can you? But I just could not suspend my disbelief that they could go all on their merry way without realising that their child wasn't with them. And it bothered me so much that I just didn't enjoy the film whatsoever. I was just too rooted in this whole idea that, you know, they would know if Kevin wasn't with them. So I just couldn't get on with it, and I've never been able to rewatch it since, actually. Perhaps I should. Number 9 is E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. I felt that as a young autistic girl who really struggled with other children and really trying to kind of understand social dynamics and how other children were able to get on with each other, I felt that the whole thing about them finding ET and advocating for ET and including them in their whole family when he was so different to them was unbelievable, really. I couldn't get on board with the idea that a child or children would be able to show this much empathy to an alien, really. And I felt that their responses would be more in tune with this viral tweet. And yeah, I couldn't get on board with it. And I actively disliked this movie as a child. I watched it just the once, I think, and I just never wanted to see it again because it really bothered me. I just felt that it was kind of too saccharine in many ways. It played it straight in a way that we didn't see with other kind of, you know, alien kind of concepts in TV and film, where it's kind of more jokey, really. You know, I really enjoyed Alf in the 90s, and that's obviously another alien living with a family, but because it's played for laughs, it's yeah, it just kind of suited me much better. And it felt too kind of po-faced, really, or too straight, that this kind of well, alien creature was able to attract all this kind of warmth and empathy from children, when actually I felt children were really difficult to understand. And yeah, just I couldn't relate to it at all, really. I could not relate to that experience. So yeah, I just was not into that film whatsoever as a child. Number 10 is laughter tracks on TV shows, and I will never understand why they're included, really. If your joke isn't funny enough to land without some kind of prompt to tell you it's supposed to be funny, then surely it's not funny. And I just find laughter tracks really distracting more than anything. And now that I know that I'm autistic, I'm a late diagnosed autistic person, I really struggle with kind of noise sensitivity, and whenever there's any kind of additional or extraneous noise, such as laughter tracks, I kind of lose focus on what I'm watching, because I'm thinking, why on earth have they included this? It makes no sense whatsoever, and it actually kind of cheapens the show. And I can't believe how many shows have included laughter tracks through the years, and I've no idea why the first person that put on a laughter track on a TV show thought it was a good idea, because it's just dreadful, isn't it? Why on earth would we need a prompt? When we consider humour is such a subjective thing, what one person finds funny, another just won't at all. So why do we need these prompts when they're just irritating and really distracting? So I'm no fan of them. So there we have it. There's my 10 moments in TV and film that I've just not been able to get along with as an autistic person. And it's something that I wanted to do really for a bit of fun, because I'm a kind of pop culture artist, really. It's something that I'm really drawn to as a theme. So I just thought it'd be really interesting to explore this today. And I'd love to know if you can relate to any of the instances I've given today, or better still, let me know your own moments in pop culture history that have just left you kind of scratching your head a bit as to, yeah, you know, I don't get on with this, and I don't really understand it. I would love to know. So leave those down below in comments. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.